Good evening. Welcome once again to Step Up, Make a Difference, the podcast. I'm Mike Peacock, one of your co-hosts here with my good friend, Dr. Marty Durden. Marty, how are you this week?
Oh, doing great, my friend. Good to see your face. We have such a great guest today. I got to admit, I'm pumped to have our guest today who is not only a friend, a great coach, a great pastor, but he has made such a great difference in our lives.
No doubt. No doubt. We have, as Marty said, we have our good friend, colleague at one time for both of us, and a local pastor here in Columbus, Georgia, who has he's been around the block a time or two. He's done a lot of different things, but Coach Mike Grant joins us today. He is a local pastor. He had spent some time in the NFL, and Marty and I worked together with him at Calvary Christian School not too long ago, and Mike still helps out at Calvary on the coaching staff over there. Welcome to Step Up, Make a Difference to podcasts, Michael Grant. It is great to have you and great to see you, my friend.
Well, thank you all so much for having me. Two friends. Like you both have said, I think friend is the common term amongst both of us. All of us, we've served as colleagues, we've served as coaches, we've worn many hats in our times together, but I consider you both friends, and I'm grateful to be on this podcast. I'm grateful that it's taken off and starting to touch lives the way that I'm sure you both envisioned. So I'm humbled to be a part of the podcast today.
We're just honored to have you here. We named this
great.
Step Up for a reason, and you're one of those guys who has stepped up in so many ways, and you're making such a difference. You see coaching in a different light than the average person, don't you?
I do, Coach. I do, and throughout this podcast, to all you listeners, I'm sure you'll hear us calling each other coach, because not only did we coach together, but that we believe that's one of the most influential positions that one can hold in the life of human beings, young men and women around the country. And you're right. I see it through a different lens, Marty, than a lot of people perhaps who hold the position. I've heard you say, diving deep into this, right? I mean, we're going to hit it real fast, real hard, right? I've heard you say that the two positions that are probably two of the most influential positions are that of a pastor and that of a coach. And I hold both of those positions, and so I don't take that lightly. And I don't try and separate the two, if that makes sense. I realize that those two influential positions, they touch people's lives when they are in vulnerable or open states and spiritually speaking, and then when they're pursuing their athletic dreams, goals, and aspirations. And if you're able to merge faith with a person's drive and their will to win, I think that's a power-packed union. And so I approach coaching. I've been coaching for, I think, about 11 or 12 years now. And I've always looked to merge faith and sports as one. I think the saying goes, faith, family, and football. That holds true concerning my approach to coaching any sport that I coach.
Yeah, no doubt,
I totally
Coach.
agree with you. My mother. Go ahead, Coach.
I was fortunate enough to be with you for a couple of years on the coaching staff at Calvary. You and I coached middle school football together my first year at Calvary, and then the second year we were on the varsity staff together, and also worked a little bit with the middle schoolers some more. And you are back working mainly with middle school guys now, and have done a tremendous job with that middle school program. And your approach has always been it's something that I admired from the get-go because number one, you make those kids feel important and that they belong. But number two, you teach them a sense of honor and of uh, love for their program, teamwork, pulling together. I remember what was it you called it, the Iron Knight. Uh,
Iron
that first,
Knights.
and we had the stickers on the back of our helmets with the knight helmet, and those kids bought into that. And I think that's just a huge thing. But we're going to talk more about that. But first, let's do this like we always do. Let's kind of set up and tell everybody the Michael Grant story and how you grew up, when you got into football. Bring up some influential people in your life as far as anybody really, your mentors, your coaches coming through, and then how you went through college football into the NFL, and then how you came back full circle now and are a pastor and a coach here in Columbus. Just kind of take us through that. You don't have to take your time. You don't have to hurry either. So, whatever version you want to give.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate that. Full circle is a best way to say it, because starting out my journey, sports and ministry have always worked in tandem. I grew up in church. Family, parents always had us around ministry, whether it be, youth groups, vacation Bible school, Sunday school, what have you. We always grew up around church. But my father got me involved in football early on. I remember playing football at the age of 5 years old. And consequently, 5 years old, that was also the time that I gave my life to Christ knowingly. I heard the gospel. People say, man, 5 years old, but I just got it. I heard the gospel, learned who Jesus was, and I was as pure and innocent as I was at that age. I said, I want to give my life to that Jesus. And, so faith and football started out early and went on through middle school here locally in Columbus, Georgia. Went to high school, graduated, and even prior to graduation, my faith was evident amongst my peers when I was in high school. I believed in living best to my ability anyway, what I believed. And it really was infectious around the guys that I played football and other sports with. And so I began to become a leader, not only in sports, but in faith. Went on to college and went to Grambling State University in Louisiana. I spent 2 years there, but while I was there, I launched the first Fellowship of Christian Athletes huddle that was launched. I'll never forget, a guy named Bro Nader was the regional director, and I was doing a small Bible study in my dorm room, and our head coach at the time, Doug Williams, connected Bro and I, and Bro really, gave me the assistance that was needed to grow that into a campus-wide Bible study for a Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And we had over 100 athletes attending those FCA huddles at that time. And so playing faces, transition took place. Before there was a portal, I think I jumped into it and transitioned from Grambling State and ended up landed in Mars Hill University, now University Mars Hill College, and just continued to do the same thing. I was serving in ministry at a local church in Asheville, North Carolina, the River of Life it was then called, and I was able to finish out my degree at Mars Hill. So I was serving in ministry, leading in ministry at a local church, and also leading on the football team. I was a captain of the team, one of the captains, and did so well, went on to have an opportunity to play professionally. I played in the early 2000s for the Cleveland Browns. I say played, that just means I was there, because I ended up getting injured my rookie season. And ministry and football, or faith and football, continuing to be consistent. I ended up being allowed to lead part of the men's Bible study. Tom Petersburg, a leader in Athletes in Action, he was our team chaplain, and he gave me the freedom to teach a men's Bible study. And again, leading in faith, as well as being able to achieve a goal of making a roster of an NFL football team. Just continuing those two things to be consistent throughout my journey. Fast forward, I was able, after coming back home after my second year in the league, I felt the draw and a pull to serve in ministry again full time. And I came back home to Columbus, Georgia, was serving at our church's ministry. But then, other opportunities opened up at Calvary Christian, where Brian Osborne and David Spitzmiller and that whole group was like, one of my sons was attending Calvary, and they were both like, man, we would love to have you on the staff. And I just loved Brian's approach to football because it tied to my beginnings, faith and football. And Brian was we all know Brian and his approach to leading in sports. I just bought into it and felt like it was the right place. So began to coach there, then got an opportunity to coach as an intern with the New York Jets during the summer training camp. Did the next season for the Arizona Cardinals, but was still just living out my faith, and God opened doors for me to get exposed to high level football, not just as a player, but as a coach. But kind of said, coming back full circle, God's path for me was to serve full time in ministry. And so I just took all of that knowledge and brought it back here, and I wanted to invest it in my sons, invested in young men that I had influence with through the Calvary Christian football program. And so now I've been able to coach both of my sons through the middle school program. I coached Peacock the second year that we were together. I was able to coach our oldest son at the varsity level, and just came full circle and was able to show them how you can be a phenomenal athlete. You can play hard, you can hit hard, you can make big plays, but still live out your faith and be an example of what it looks like to be a man of God on the gridiron. And so when we coached together that first year, Mike, we were able to have an undefeated team. That was my oldest son. That was his team. And now last year, I coached an undefeated team with our younger son. He's an eighth grader now, and trying to do the same thing again. So it's been fun to show these guys that, you can play great football, you can live out your faith, and watch them, have their journey to potentially approach it similar to the way that I did as a man of faith playing high level football. So that's kind of been my journey, my story. I've been serving as senior pastor of the church that my family founded, Faith Worship Center here in Columbus. But I just couldn't let go of the football field just yet because both my boys were still out there playing. So it's been fun to watch them and be a part.
I don't think there's any difference. In ministry, it's just a podium. It's just where you're standing, You're standing on the grass sometimes. Sometimes you're standing behind the pulpit. But the message really, I've heard you both spots, right? And it resonates to people's hearts in both places. There's something about the game of football, especially, that is just a laboratory for human nature, and the concept of teamwork, sacrifice, hard work, obedience, loyalty, all the things that we as Christians try to practice in our lives are just so apparent on a football team. And I just feel like that you're the perfect example of a guy who enters both of those worlds with equal stature. It doesn't matter to you one bit. Your ministry is just the same ministry, two different spots. And that is, to me, that is just a wonderful thing. And God equipped you.
It is, and it's really rewarding. Yeah, it is. It's really rewarding, Marty, because you're able to see people, kind of like I mentioned, in some of the most vulnerable stages and phases of life, and be a voice of encouragement, be a motivator, give guidance subtly, and kind of help people make decisions that's going to not just have big impact for a moment, but it'll have lasting memories in the church of eternal implications, and within the field of, or the sport of football, for the rest of their lives, they'll have these stories to testify and remember.
Coach, I'm gonna bring this up again, and our listeners are gonna get tired of hearing me say this every week. But a few weeks ago, we had a guy named Dan Britton on here from Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and Dan had been with FCA for a long time. As a matter of fact, he got promoted and started the international side of FCA. And you mentioned earlier, you were talking about the role that a coach plays and how vital that role is. And it's very similar to being in the ministry. And it's one of the two most important roles that a man can fill as a coach or a minister, the most influential over people, and especially over young people. So Dan was telling us a story, and I hope you find this as interesting and as profound as I did. But he was telling us a story about they had a conference with all of their international coaches, and he said they probably had, what was it, Marty, 100 international coaches or so at this meeting.
Yes.
And he came up with the idea with his staff, something they could put together, a video, and he wanted every guy there from all these different countries that were gathered together. He wanted to put them at a mic, introduce themselves, and say the word coach in their native language. And he said, I wanted to make that into a video. And he said, that way we could kind of have that, and we could play it for different things and all of that. He said, so we set it up. He said, I thought my idea was great. And he said, so we set it up, and we had these guys come in, and one by one, they came up there. They introduced themselves. They said what country they were from. And he said, then we asked them to say the word coach in your native language. And he said, do you know that every single one of those guys, no matter where they were from on the globe, when they stepped to that mic, they introduced themselves, and we told them to say the word coach in their native language. He said, you know where it was? He said, it was coach. He said, no matter what language they spoke, the word was coach. And I said, and Dan said, so he said, I feel like, that was kind of a failure. And I said, no, wait a minute, Dan. I said, no. I said, that's powerful. I said, to me, that is powerful. Having been a coach and been a part of the coaching fraternity and community, to know that word is the same all over the world and what it represents all over the world. I said, that's pretty doggone powerful. And, so I wanted you to be aware of that, and maybe you can use that sometime down the road, but that's a true story. And Dan told us, he said, you know what? He said, I kind of feel bad now. He said, I kind of felt like I failed on that thing. He said, but really and truly, he said, you're right. He said, that's pretty powerful. And so I wanted you to hear about that, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, Coach, man, that is powerful. I'm glad that you were able to turn that towards a more positive perspective for him, because I'll kind of show you something that, in my opinion, shows the power of what you just said. I spoke in the Dominican Republic this past weekend, and obviously they speak Spanish, and so I needed a translator for every moment. Google Translator was wearing my battery down on my phone, just trying to make sure that I was connecting with the messages that were stated. I had a translator as I was speaking, but there was one word And I found this to be true in many settings around the world, and we know this to be true in the church setting or in the Christian setting, where there's one word that is the same throughout church settings and as we're praising God and so forth, and that word is hallelujah. And so all other words, I needed a translator, but I didn't need a translator for hallelujah, right? And so for what is acknowledged as one of the most powerful words of praise being the same around the word, to equate the concept of coach being globally the same, I think that's pretty impressive. So I'm not saying that hallelujah and coach are on the same level, but that's pretty impressive for them both to be the same all around the world. I like that.
That's amazing. There's so many elements, in the Christian life that they're universal. Yeah, it doesn't matter what language you say them in. I bet the word Jesus, when you speak the word Jesus in Russian or Chinese, I bet people know what we're talking about. So there's just some things that we have in our lives that are so precious that everybody knows what they are. And Jesus is one of them. And it's interesting that coach is one of those. The word coach is one of them too. It's awesome, isn't it? Mike, what do you think is the one message that you would preach? I mean, to young people today, you're in a position where you pastor a lot of young people, and part of coaching is a pastoral duty. It's pastoral duty, and servant leadership has a pastoral side to it. We need to be in a position to help reconcile people, to forgive people, to help them when they're down. What is the one message that you think that the young person of today, this Gen Z group of kids, who personally I'm encouraged by the life they live. I'm really encouraged by Generation Z and what they're doing. What would you say to them as an older, coach? What message do you think we need to preach to Gen Z?
That's a great question. For me, the answer is simple, is that they just need to know that God loves them. I think the world that they experience on a day-to-day basis doesn't talk up God and faith enough. If you think about, social media and, the things that go on in that world, if you think about the classroom and what's allowed to be discussed within a classroom, when you think about their interactions with their peers and the stress and the pressure of attempting to compete with one another and relate to one another, it's all about their place in the world, but very few are the voices that speak to them that the creator of the world loves them, cares for them, and has a place and a purpose and a plan for their lives. So I just believe introducing them to the fact that, there is a God who created all these things, though these things don't look like him, though these things a lot of them don't express his heart towards his creation and his sons and daughters. He loves them, he cares for them, and he wants them to live a fulfilled and purposeful life. I often have the privilege of meeting young people from different walks of life. And when I get to, the conversational piece of, hey, how's your relationship with God? It's almost like this blank look comes over their face as if, no one has ever asked me that. And it's like, yeah, that's one of the most important aspects of your life. And not only is it important, God thinks it's important. God has a plan. I want you to, feel and know his love. And so I just think there's a divide, and that makes sense for us who understand the purpose of the cross. There's a divide between Gen Z and the love of God, and letting them know that God so loved them that he gave his only son so that they could be back in relationship with him, sin is the great divide, but Jesus is the great connector. And that love that he has for them, he wants to be in relationship with them. So I believe that's the message. All the other stuff is fixable. All the other stuff, the mindset, that what, it said of laziness or entitlement, all that stuff is fixable once you deal with the baseline or the bottom line, that there's a God who created you. He loves you. He wants relationship with you. Someone else's disobedience created this snowball effect of sin that he wants to rectify through the sacrifice of his son, Jesus. And, once you accept that perfect plan, you can live a life of purpose connected to your God. I believe that's the message.
Hey, let me say this too, in support of that notion right there. We do a lot of research on young people in athletic settings. We're up into thousands of kids in 9 states. You know that. We've talked about it before. And it's always been the number one thing that kids, that motivates them the most in their coach or in their leader, is trust, right? It's always been trust. You and I did a small study in a church you're very familiar with one time, remember? And the number one resonator was love. That was the first time. What was it? Maybe two years ago, two or 3 years ago. You're right. So now we start each year. We start fresh with these numbers, and so right now trust is higher than it's ever been. It's always been around 36%. Now it's 38%. But you know what is the same? It's exactly the same. 38% is love. Love is the new motivator that's emerged in our research. It was empowerment. You just said the word entitlement, and you I think you can sort of reference the kids. They want to be empowered, right? They want to be empowered in their lives, and they still do. Right. But empowered is going down, and love is trending up to the point that they view love and trust as the same motivator in their lives. To me, that turned a light on for me.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. That's powerful, because trust was strong for years, if I remember correctly in your research. Now for love to surface as one being equal to trust, that lets us know that there's something in everyone's heart. And this podcast, Step Up, we're talking about not just sports. We're not just talking about, making a difference on the field of play, but a difference in life. That spiritual or that faith aspect of everyone's existence. There's something in everyone's heart. There's a void that only God can fill. And sometimes we search for it in different things and in different approaches. And it's kind of coming back to the point of the power of the position of a coach in the life of a player. Man, if we think back, Coach Peacock, I failed to acknowledge some influential people in my life, but I'll name a few. When I was a little league football player, my dad was my coach. He was the one that influenced me. He was my beginning, voice of encouragement. And the thing that I remember most about him as a coach was he didn't allow other coaches to speak negatively about me just because I was a work in progress. He always encouraged me, and he protected me through that heart of love of a father as well as a coach. And I go to, high school, and I'm coached by one of the local legends, Charles Flowers. And the thing that I remember most about Coach Flowers was not just, the graveyard shifts and the hard coaching moments that I got in the game. What I remember is one day my parents, when I was early on freshman or sophomore year, my parents who were serving in ministry were at a service late, and they were late picking me up. And I was just getting out of a game. I didn't have any, dry clothes. He let me borrow a sweatshirt, and he let me come. He took me, and kept me with his family until my family was able to get to me like a coach would. That was the love that I got from that coach. You know, I think about people like Kevin Barnett, who's now the head coach at Mars Hill University, how he was my defensive coordinator at Mars Hill, but I don't merely remember his hard coaching and preparation. I remember sitting down in his office, having conversations with him, and how he was talking about person to person, man to man, giving me nuggets about life to prepare me for what was next after graduation. I could go a step further and talk about Todd Bowles, who's now the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, when I had little to no coaching experience, took a chance on me and let me get some coaching experience at the National Football level to the point that it absolutely free. And so I just, you know, it's more than just X's and O's. It was more than just, you know, being taught the game of football. It was love that I was able to experience firsthand from these influential people in my life, these influential next in life.
Yeah, that's no doubt about it. And you mentioned your dad, and you know, I've told you this before. My dad was a pastor. My dad was a minister like you are now, and he never coached me because he was not an athletic person, but he was present all the time. My teammates would laugh at me sometimes in high school because my dad would get there an hour early for a baseball game, and he would be sitting up in the stands by himself, and he always wore a tie. My dad wore a tie everywhere he went. And they were like, "Who's that guy up there in the stands wearing a tie?" And, you know, and finally they learned who it was, and they learned it was my dad. You know, and I was like, that's my dad. He wears a tie everywhere. And had a couple of them tell me, you know, it's cool that he gets here so early. And he said, but it's even more cool that he's here. You know, because a lot of those guys, sometimes their folks didn't show up. And it, you know, for various reasons, maybe it was work, maybe it was other things, but a lot of times I think it was because their parents really weren't interested in what they were doing. You know, that was kind of cool to see that an example of a father who was there. But I had some great coaches growing up, guys you wouldn't know. But then when I got here to Columbus, I've met so many. And I've been around so many, and I've heard the stories of so many. Charles Flowers, for example. I mean, what can you say about Charles Flowers? He's a Hall of Famer. He is a tremendous example of a successful coach. And it's because of some of the tenets that we talk about all the time and that we have discussed here. The guys trusted him. The guys believed in what he was doing. They didn't take the hard coaching personally. They took it that he was trying to make them better and was trying to help them. And look at some of the people he produced out of his programs. I mean, you went to the NFL. There's other guys that went to the NFL, to Major League Baseball, and places like that. And others have gone on to be extremely successful in other endeavors outside athletics. And you don't have that kind of resume if you're doing it wrong. You know, and that's one thing I like to point out with all these guys. You know, sometimes, oh, he's old school. And what they mean by he was old school is like he coached you and he told you like he meant it, you know, and you took it, and you might have to run a little bit, you know, and you might have to go through those hard things. But at the end of the day, you knew he had your back. And you wanted to run through a wall for him because you could trust him, and you knew he believed in you. And I think you've brought that forward in your coaching and in your ministry. Talk about how important that is in that belief system, the back and forth that you have with young folks.
Yeah, Coach. I think it's key to success. You know, I think, we didn't come up in the day and age of what's now called gentle parenting. we were, we were reared by parents who were like, it's my way or the highway. They spare the rod, spoil the child. It was different. And I think if we're not careful, what we could lose in trying to make everyone comfortable in, the things that they're facing in life, and trying to rescue players from hardship, and let's talk about the portal, right? If it's not the way you like it at one school, then you just pack up your bags and leave and go to another school. If we're not careful, we'll rob these, if we agreeing with that to a level of extreme. And I'm not saying that the portal is a bad thing, but I am saying that sometimes it's good to just buckle down and go through the hard thing and not run from a challenge, because, some of the greatest, character traits that can be built in life comes from the hard stuff, comes from someone holding you accountable. It comes from that, Nick Saban-esque coach that's holding you, holding your feet to the fire about what the standard is. And, it makes you a better man. And I believe that is necessary in sports. And I believe that's necessary in our faith. Accountability is mandatory. As the saying goes, we as brothers should, as iron sharpen iron, we should strengthen and be a help to our brother. That, iron against iron, that's not a nice feeling. That means sometimes we'll rub each other the wrong way, but it helps us become better men. And so even concerning our faith, we've all been in a circle of friends for some years now. And I often am reminded of Marty inserting, little words of encouragement to some of our friends. Be a little sweeter there, be a little nicer there. Come on, soften that up a little bit. That's a little too firm. But, just holding us accountable to what we know to be right. And that's healthy. And so I believe, Coach, I believe that's vital to the development of men. A man's man, a guy who's able to stand flat-footed, be a provider for his family, a husband to his wife, a father to his children. Just whether you're a coach, a pastor, a minister, or whether you're just a guy that's leading his family, we need that. We need that strong sense of being held accountable and being present. To your point, Coach P, being present in one another's lives, and especially in the lives of the players that we coach and the parishioners that we minister to.
I think that masculinity, godly masculinity, there's not enough of it in our society today. I think that one of the toughest things to do as a parent, you got two boys, Mike's got two sons, I have two sons. One of the toughest things to do is to be tough on your kids, watch them struggle. No, you can't help them, because the burden that you're laying on them is going to make them better men. But it is our call. I think the way you build men is you harness them up like you do a pair of oxen, and you get them to pull a heavy load. Bear Bryant once said, you never know how much a mule can pull until you hook them to a heavy load. And there's a lot of wisdom to that in our life. Sometimes we don't know because we don't give them enough adversity in their lives in a controlled way to help them deal with adversity.
Man, that's so true. That is so true. Speaking of sons, Marty, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but my son going into his senior year, I can't count the number of inquiries we got about, hey, is he going to stay at his school? And would y'all be interested in potentially, him, I guess, therefore seeing that, taking his talent and being a part of a robust program was something that would have been intriguing to us. And but our position was, we want to finish what we started. And we weren't looking for the easy road. We knew that this year might potentially be a year with his role changing, that he has to shift his approach to leadership. He's playing quarterback last year, and now he's playing more of an H-back. They kind of move him around and plays different positions because obviously that's where some of the schools that have been recruiting him, that's where they see him playing at the next level. So he's shifted his responsibilities. And the season didn't start out the way that team intended. They were struggling to get a W. They were able to get a big win this past weekend, so we were all happy for them. But the point of it is, I had the conversation with my oldest son. We had the conversation. We said, look, man, you could easily just run to where everybody is, where everybody's assuming there will be success. But I said, life won't be that way. You won't be able to leave and run to the easy route when you're a husband to your wife, when you're a father to your sons. You're going to have to stick it out and be a young man and make, decisions that are good even in hard times. And I've been so impressed with him by how he's bought into that and how he has been willing to stay the course and be coachable, to our point, right? To be coachable and say, yeah, Dad, I don't want easy because my freshman year in college might not be easy. Or shucks, my senior year in college, I don't know, we may not have as good a team my senior year as we had my junior year, and I may have to, take on a different role. I don't want to take the easy route. And I just believe, I've often said this to him. I said, man, God is going to reward you. I said, God is going to exceed your expectations because you're not running from it. As a young man, you're embracing the journey, and there's going to be a great reward for you. If not now, in life when you need it. And that's, in my opinion, when it counts the most, when those lessons that we learn from a game that we all love, like football, where it really meets life, and where, Marty, you said it starting us out, where you had to learn the tough out situations, and now you're in life and you know that you're tough enough to make it. Oh man, that's a good feeling. You can pull on that competitor within and succeed or pursue success. So yeah, I'm grateful to be able to pass that on to our sons and see them in their journey take on these traits, these lessons to benefit them for a lifetime.
You're telling them the right thing too, Mike. I'll amen you. You're doing that right, buddy.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Hey, and I want to bring up something, Mike. You mentioned that verse, as iron sharpens iron, and you talked about how everybody kind of wants to remove difficulty. That we've gotten in this idea that we don't want it to be hard. We don't want you to be hard on them. We don't want you. But you know what? That verse says, as iron sharpens iron. How does a knife get sharp? It has to go through friction, and a lot of it. And that's adversity. That's pulling. Friction is something operating in the opposite direction, okay, as you're trying to go. And that's what adversity is all about. And if we remove adversity from the path of young people, whether they're male, female, whether it's in athletics, whether it's just in general life, whether it's in school, if we remove that friction and we remove adversity, then we're going to have a whole generation of people that don't know how to solve a problem because they're going to give up every time they face adversity. And I think that's the thing that people miss with coaches a lot of times. And a lot of coaches, especially at the high school and middle school level these days, get criticized because they're too hard on the kids. But the parents don't understand. You have to be hard on the kids because they have to be held accountable for their actions, whether that's in class, whether that's in generally walking around the school, or whether it's on the practice field or the game field. You have to be held accountable to your actions. And when adversity strikes, you can't just walk away and step around it. You have to go through it. If you're going to get better, you have to go through it. That's what do we do to build our muscles? We lift weights, right? Well, when you pick that weight up off the bar, it's going in the opposite direction you want it to, right? And if it's too heavy, it's going to come down on you unless you put some force back on it. And the more times you rep it and the more times you go through it, the easier it becomes. And then you learn how to solve those problems. And I think that the world sometimes wants it to be easy, and they want everything to be, they want to skate through. I've been having this discussion with my 21-year-old about accountability and about adversity and about difficulty. And I was like, buddy, you got to realize everything's not going to go your way. You're going to have to compete. You're going to have to get in there and you're going to have to go for it. I mean, he's going into a field of endeavor where there's going to be a lot of competition. When he gets his undergraduate degree, there's going to be a lot of competition for what he wants to do to finish out his professional life. And I was like, you've got to be in line and you've got to be willing to get in there and compete. And you've got to push yourself to compete. And you've got to hold yourself accountable in all aspects of it. And trying to help him understand that. He understands some. He's an athlete, so he knows about all of that. He knows about being coached hard. He knows about being pushed. But now he's got to learn it on his own a little bit as he's coming into adulthood about that adversity. When adversity strikes, you got choices. You can turn and run the other way. You can step to the side and try to avoid it, or you can go right through the middle of it and come out on the other side of it a better person. And that's the thing, I think, as coaches, as dads, as pastors, as leaders in general, we got to help people understand.
Man, Coach, that's so spot on. I agree with you 100%. I mentioned earlier, 11 or 12 years coaching for me. The two of you, far exceed that. And I can guarantee, I know if I've seen it, I know you all have seen it, 10 times, even the more. Those athletes that avoid it on the field, skipping practice, can't be accountable to coaching. We see that later in life in those same players when they've walked away from the sport, when they've walked away, we see them when they're older in life. And, God forbid if they're not locked up or strung out on something, or, life has just really taken advantage of them. But it's not a surprise to us. It's not something that we hope for. It's not something that we wanted for that particular player. But we saw that trait of running away, avoiding hardship. And, sometimes those parents enable them, not to point the finger in any way, but just my point is we have seen it at its infantile state of, hey, if we don't address this is going to be a problem in life for you. And I'm sure we both can count on both hands the number of players that, unfortunately, when we tried to get that message across to them early in life, it didn't take. And now they're suffering the consequences as adult men. And that's a horrible thing to see, but it's reality. So I totally agree. We can't make things easy for people, especially when they're in a controlled environment with us. Shucks, I'd rather it be hard at middle school football so they can learn there. And then when they're dealing with bills and life unexpected issues and challenges that grow up as adults, they're geared up and ready for it, as opposed to catching it for its first time when it really matters and when it really counts.
That's exactly right. That's the beauty of coaching right there. We have them in that laboratory to teach them those lessons. Hey, Mike, I know you got to go. We've had a great time with you, but leave us with a good verse to get us through the week. Tell us something that we need to hear that'll help us get back to next week.
Well, I think one scripture that just comes to mind.
Give us some of your
concerning this conversation. I believe it's Colossians 3 around 23, that in whatever you do, do it passionately as unto God, not unto men. And what that scripture or that passage of scripture speaks to me is, I'm aiming to please not just good friends and amazing men like Mike Peacock and Marty Durden, who I hold in high esteem, but there's someone that's even greater than those who sees all, knows all, and who I should aim to please and impress and give my best effort towards, and that's God. You know, anytime in life, especially when we're working a day-to-day, or even in sports for young people, as you're, you know, or if you're coaching young people, the goal is often just, it's minuscule, it's minimal. We're trying to win the game, or we're trying to improve on the field of play. We're trying to make better grades. We want to be a better husband. We want to be a better provider for our families, or what have you. But that's limited. That's finite. When it comes to what really matters, we should often keep it in our forefront of our minds to keep eternity in our view, which means we want to honor God in all that we do. And the reason that I'm so driven, the reason that I should be so committed, is not just because I want to please the people who I care about, but I want to please the God who creates us, who created us all. And so we want to, in everything we do, have a God focus. In everything that we are trying to get accomplished, ask ourselves, as the old saying or the old acronym WWJD, you know, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus say about how I'm approaching this? And if my aim is to please him, everyone else will be taken care of. So in everything we do, do it passionately as unto God and not unto man.
That's great. Mike, we always do this, but I'm going to bring up a little tidbit that a lot of people don't know, that you and I have another little kind of connection. What's your wife's name?
That's right. My wife's name is Dana.
And what's my wife's name?
And your wife's name is Dana. Mike and Mike, Dana and Dana.
And Mike and Mike, Dana and Dana, and we both have two sons, and you know, they're spaced apart a little bit, which is hilarious, but that's pretty funny. But one thing that we always do on our episodes of the podcast, one of the very last things that we do before we sign off, we ask our guest, if you were sitting in front of a young man who is either going into coaching or is already in coaching and learning the ropes of being a coach, what is one or two solid pieces of advice you would give them on how to advance their coaching career forward and do it right?
Ooh, that's a good one, Coach. Man, that's a good one. You know, I frame it this way. Most young coaches that I've seen coming into the sport, their desire is to be successful coaches from a viewpoint of winning games, getting greater, you know, positions, promotions, excelling from whatever level they're in to whatever level they esteem as, you know, the pinnacle of what they are in pursuit of. And my first statement to them would be, Coach, pump your brakes, because that you'll find real soon that stuff is not what coaching is all about. We've often said coaching is not about the X's and the O's, but it's the Jimmys and the Joes. We say that concerning the ability to be able to compete well. If I got a roster full of some dudes, then we'll be able to compete. But I bring that into the context of, you know, what you aspire to do and what you desire to accomplish as a coach. Rather than be known as the greatest schematic guy or the greatest positional coach, and all that stuff is important. We must do our due diligence to equip our players to succeed on the field of play. But I'm here to tell you, coaching is about influencing young men, young boys to become great men. And that happens relationally. Yeah. It doesn't happen just from making them, you know, all-stars. You're going to get some talented players from here. You know, some seasons you're going to get a boatload of them. And sometimes you're going to be trying to figure out, you know, who to X off your schedule so you can make it through the season. But it's all about influencing these boys and helping them become young men. And whether you go undefeated, as each of us on here, I'm sure, have had the privilege of being able to do at some point in our careers, or whether you go over, which we all dread, if we are able, in whatever of those scenarios are, if we're able to impact young men's lives for the better, 4 years from now, 5 to 10 years from now, you'll see a guy come up to you and say, "Hey, coach," and you're trying to make out who that guy is because his hair. His face has more hair on it than it did when you first had him. And, you know, he's a little more brawny. His voice is a bit deeper. He'll come up to you and say, Coach, man, who you were in my life, and I appreciate what you do. Those are the most rewarding moments that a championship won't compare to it. We all have been a part of championship programs where we've won the championship and we're celebrating after, and then the next day it's like wash, rinse, repeat. We're in pursuit of what's next. But every time you touch a young man's life, nothing compares. And maybe I'm just different, but I've gotten the championship ring and it's sitting collecting dust. But nothing compares to these young guys that I see that have gone on to start careers, have families, be husbands, be fathers, work in the workforce and make an impact. How about this? Be men of faith. And they come back and share their faith with me and how their time as a part of our program made the difference. That's the part that is worth the coaching. So if you're about to start the coaching journey, I know you want to be known as this great man, but I don't think heaven is keeping record of wins and losses as pertains to games. I believe heaven keeps records of souls won and lives impacted, won, built, or sent concerning being helped along their life's journey. And that's made all the difference for me.
I hear you. Hey, I want to read you guys a quote. A good friend of mine who's retired from coaching now, but he posted this on his social media this week, and I shared it around. But it was originally posted by Matt Lyle. I don't know if either one of you guys follow him on social media or not, but he's in the baseball and softball world, and he's a tremendous individual, Coach Matt Lyle. But he put this on his page, and it actually came from the group Proactive Coaching, and you've probably seen some of their material before. But I thought this was the coolest thing. He says, I hope every athlete finds at least one coach who they want to invite to their wedding. Think about that for a second. That means you have made a difference in that kid's life, and you are special enough to him that he wants you there to see him walk down the aisle and get married and take that next step of life. Think about how big that is. That's when coach, I know you just said it, and I'm the same way. When those kids call you coach and you haven't been called coach in a long time, and it may be somebody from, 25 years ago, that calls you that. And it makes you feel special and it feels good. But you know what? It feels great too when one of those kids honors you by saying, hey, I want you to come to my wedding. Hey, coach, I'm getting married. I want you to be there. That is pretty doggone cool. And I appreciate Jeff Hines for sharing that earlier this week. I had missed that one on Matt Lyle's stuff, and I appreciate that. But that's what we're all about here. We want coaches coaching athletes in such a way that they get a lot of wedding invitations, and they get invited to a lot of draft parties and things like that. That when those guys are taking those next steps, or they call their coach when they get that promotion at work, or when they get that first big job, they call one of the people that they call is their coach, because that's how much that guy meant to them, and that's when you've made a difference. And that's, as we say, that's how when you've stepped up and made a difference in that young man's life. And that's what we're all about here. Michael Grant, great having you today. We appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you joining us for this. It's been a great time, and who knows, we may have you back on a little bit later to talk about some more of this stuff, because we got a lot we can talk about. That's for sure. That's right. But folks, thanks for joining us again this week on another episode of Step Up. Marty, hope you have a great week this week. You got anything to say before we get out of here with everybody?
I love Michael Grant, and he is when he preaches on Sunday mornings, the thing that has always amazed me the most is he quotes 25, 30 scriptures word for word, and he never looks down one time at a note. You gotta see it to believe it. He lives it.
Right.
It's not words.
Hey.
It's he lives it. And that's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life.
And I'll tell you this too. I'll add on to that. When he preaches, he brings it. Yeah, he brings it. And there's no doubt. And I love it. I love it. And so I've enjoyed coming to your church and seeing you in the pulpit, and you bring it. And that's the way it ought to be. It shouldn't be a TED talk. You should be bringing it.
Thanks,
so that's what it is.
I appreciate you guys. I've enjoyed being with you all today as well.
Absolutely. Well, folks, have a great week. We're already in the second week of September. The year's getting away from us. But remember, anytime you get the opportunity, step up and make a difference in somebody's life. We'll see you next week. Have a great week. Good night, everybody.
Mike, man, that was awesome. You hit it out of the park.
This was fun.
That's good stuff.
Hey, it was easy feeding off of you two. That was fun.
Yeah, that's good to hear. We're gonna have
Thanks
you back.
for the invite as well.
You're welcome. Hey, listen, I want to have you.
Good stuff.
I want to bring you in one of my classes with a Zoom. I teach a coaching class. I want to bring you in one day on that. I'll let you know. It's every day about I think it's 12:30 to 1:45. I'd love to have you in there about 30 minutes when you can.
Okay.
So I'll be in touch, okay?
I'll be on it.
Hey, by the way, guys, if y'all weren't aware, Levi got his first win.
Sounds great.
Friday night.
Saw that.
Yeah.
Big. And
Levi got his
I texted him, told him congratulations. That was big.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even know it until today.
Yeah.
I've been so, I did a game. I did a broadcast Friday night, and then I did a college game yesterday. I'm on the radio crew now with Alabama State, Mike. A couple of good friends of mine over there.
Oh, cool.
One of them works at Alabama State, and the other one is the play-by-play radio guy for Alabama State. And they call me, and it's the guy I used to do TV with. And he called me and he said, "Hey, you want to do color on the radio broadcast?" And so it worked out, that it didn't interfere with Auburn games, because we've got tickets to Auburn games and all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of important to me. But,
cool.
I did the first game yesterday. So I'm D1, man.
How's the boys doing, Mike?
Yeah, I love it. Congratulations. Look, you call Aaron's game this year. They've offered him at Alabama State, so maybe you'll be calling him next year too.
yeah, that's awesome. Right? Cool, Eddie Robinson Jr. is the coach over there, and and he's doing a good job. They got a outstanding quarterback this year, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I saw him. Yeah.
How's Eric doing?
But tell Aaron, tell both of them hello from me,
guys. Anytime though, Marty, you reach out, and I know this is going to be big stuff. We'll do.
All right.
All right, guys. We got out here. Richard will get us stopped and everything. So, but Mike, thank you, man. Enjoyed it.
Okay.
Love you both.
Same here. Enjoyed it. You guys take care. Yeah, always. Much love.